Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 305. Today we are talking all about testing and performance anxiety. So we have been spending the last several episodes, this is number 4 in a 5-episode series, talking all about anxiousness, like kind of avoidance behaviors, as well as emotional regulation. And today we're focusing on the anxiety that comes along with performing, having our kids show what they know, demonstrating mastery, testing, and all of that. We're going to talk about practical strategies you can use to help your kids move past this anxiety and be successful in the process. And then we'll be back to wrap it up next week with the last episode in this series. Before we begin, though, I just want to give a special thanks to CTC Math. You'll hear more about them later on in this episode, but they are longtime sponsors of this podcast, and we are so grateful that they continue to support our efforts in reaching families who are homeschooling neurodivergent kids. So make sure, if you get a chance, you let them know that you appreciate their support of the podcast so they continue to support us. I also want to remind you that I'm a customer. I use CTC Math in our family, and I truly believe that it is one of the most adaptable and easy to use programs for neurodivergent families. You can adjust up or down as needed. It's a great program, so check them out at ctcmath.com. All right, pop those earbuds in and let's get on with today's episode. Hey there. Okay, so today we're continuing our series. This is part 4 in a 5-part series, all about anxiety, PDA, that autonomy, defense, response, and emotional regulation series. So this is part 4, and we're going to be talking about performance anxiety, specifically like testing anxiety or assessment anxiety, or just the struggles that come when our kids have to perform under pressure, and what we can do to help them when that situation arises, whether it's just performing a simple assignment and completing it within a timely manner, or actually doing tests or showing their learning in a specific way. So this is for you if your kiddo knows content but totally melts down with a countdown timer, or just before a test where they have to demonstrate their information, or they freeze, go blank, or bargain for later if you ask them to tell you what they learned. This isn't necessarily a character flaw, though it is something that we need to work on and help develop. But instead, for our kids who are really anxious and struggle with their own body and emotional regulation, it's an alarm system. It's their body telling them they're not safe and it's not a known outcome. And so they struggle to follow through in this way. So today we're going to build some accommodations that work. We're going to explore some alternatives that will help us help our kids still show mastery, and some reframes that can let our anxious, PDA leaning, and twice exceptional kiddos demonstrate what they truly know, while giving them the safety and support to build them up so that eventually, if and when they do need to take traditional tests, they feel more safe and secure in their knowledge. And so we can build the foundation of safety so that when they go to a place or get to a point where they need to demonstrate with a standard type test, they have some tools built up to do it. While we're talking through this, we're going to talk about reframing things within your homeschool to build up tools and accommodations and support that may not look at first like we're actually helping it. In fact, it may feel like we're coddling a little bit, but when we build this safety net and we build that security in our kids, we will help them grow into young adults who are able to put themselves out there. And while some come to that point sooner than others, They will get there if we keep scaffolding and building them up to the chance to show their knowledge in a traditional way. Okay, so when you leave this episode, I'm hoping that you'll have kind of in your head, or you don't have to write everything down. You can go to the show notes for this episode like always, and everything will be typed up there for you. Kind of an accommodations menu that you can make and use to adapt things at home, maybe in co-op classes or online classes your kids are taking, if you've got the flexibility to do that, along with some alternatives to testing, so that as your kids are developing the skills they need and building the safety and support that's crucial, you can assess their knowledge in different ways so that you can build up to being able to use tests and other more traditional formats, along with some reframes for kids and parents to help you rethink about how you're approaching your schooling and your testing and your assessment. Here's the thing. We're homeschooling neurodivergent kids. This is not going to look typical. This is not going to be a situation like we've talked about before, where you can just pick up a curriculum off the shelf and use it as is. These kids would struggle in the school system as well. And so we don't want to just recreate school at home. We want to make accommodations, help fill their buckets so they're safe and secure. And then they can go on to use that safety and security to approach new challenges in a more resilient way. All right, so let's talk first about what's happening when our kids struggle with performance anxiety and testing anxiety. A lot of times the brain is tagging evaluation and assessment as a threat. So because it's perceiving it as a threat, the amygdala goes into hyperdrive, right? And triggers the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And when we're talking about academics, oftentimes our working memory collapses, perfectionism surges, the autonomy defense mechanisms kick in, and this is where you see that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And then interoception can get really weird. Our kids could start having tummy aches, their hearts could be racing, they start sweating, they start to develop physical signs and symptoms of anxiety. And so, of course, we want to mitigate that as much as possible. So if the skill is there, though, during low stakes time, if when you've seen them demonstrate their knowledge when the stakes are not high, then the knowledge is there, especially if it disappears on cue when the stakes get higher. We don't have a knowledge problem with our kiddos. We have a context problem. And so we need to work on the context and the safety within that context so that they get more and more comfortable demonstrating their knowledge. Does that make sense? I'm hoping that does, because I think that's a very critical distinction to make with our kids. And the truth of the matter is, this doesn't matter if you're homeschooling or traditionally schooling or private schooling. When our kids have the information and can demonstrate it in low stakes scenarios, yet they shut down when the stakes get higher and the tests come out, this is not a knowledge problem. And too often, especially in more traditional settings, it's treated as a knowledge problem. And that's why so many of our really bright kids fall through the cracks and don't get their needs met and start to feel like failures or start becoming more and more underachieving, because the context and the safety within those different contexts isn't being addressed. Just the knowledge is, and it's being treated as if it's a knowledge gap when it's actually not. So what do? We want to make sure that we're regulating, we're helping them regulate, we're relating it back to what we need them to do and what they already know, and then we're evaluating in alternative ways. We change how we ask before we decide what they know. Okay, so let's talk about a menu of things we could adjust in order to help our kids when the stakes get a little bit higher. Okay, we're going to talk about a couple different types of accommodations and menus that we can use. And as you start to build your toolbox with and for your kiddo, I highly recommend, especially if your kids are a little bit older, you're talking through this with them and letting them help you build the accommodations toolbox, because then you're teaching them what they can do or what they can advocate for if they're ever in this situation. I've had kids that have had outside teachers, and they've recognized the kids, my children, that the way an outside teacher teaches something or assesses something isn't conducive to the way that their brain learns or the way that one of their learning disabilities or learning challenges shows up. And while they can't always get the assessment type changed, they can at least talk to their teachers or their professors about accommodations, about getting extra time, about getting a quieter environment, about getting a tutor, and getting help in that way. Because we've built these toolboxes over time, our kids know, hopefully they continue to know, that not being able to perform in every single given situation isn't a sign of failure. It's just information to help us decide what needs to happen next. So let's talk about some of these different accommodations. You can adjust the environment. If your kiddos are struggling to demonstrate their knowledge, one of the first and least stressful things we can try as parents without throwing everything out is to adjust the environment. So you could move the lesson, the assessment, the conversation to a different location. Maybe you're sitting at a table with just a small lamp glowing instead of the overhead lights, or you're going out of a room that has other noise or other people to a quieter room, or maybe your kids' brains need some of that noise to latch onto. So you're moving into an environment that has a little bit of stuff going on because they tend to focus better that way. Everybody focuses better in a different way. And so you want to adjust as needed for your kid. It might be getting out of the house completely. We have a lot going on in our house at a given time. It's a little bit quieter right now because I'm only currently homeschooling 2. And so we don't have 4 people home all the time doing all of the things. And I might not need something like this, but you might choose to go for a drive and let your kiddos have a lap desk in the car so that they're getting out of the environment they normally are and they're doing their assessment or their project or reading or whatever they need to do in a moving vehicle or on the way to something. Maybe you're outside on the porch, maybe you're on the deck, maybe you're out in the woods with a blanket spread. Sometimes dramatic changes in environment can really benefit your kid, just shifting out. I tell one of my kids all the time, if you're struggling to study and get things figured out, find a different place to go. You can also adjust the noise in the environment, have a noise plan in place. Maybe your kids, like at least one of mine, tend to disengage completely when there's too much noise going on. So maybe you have ear defenders like noise canceling headphones, over the ear headphones that just can muffle the sound a little bit. Maybe your kids like the loop earplugs. I love those personally for myself. I have a husband who, bless his heart, snores like nobody's business. And even when he has his sleep apnea mask on, he's still able to snore through it. And so I sleep with the loop earplugs in, and they are amazing, especially the ones that you can still hear through them if something's going on, like they muffle the sound, although loop has multiple different types. And I am not an affiliate or anything, though I will link some Amazon links in the show notes for loops because I really do love them. The biggest complaint I have about them is they're really small, and even their cases are very small. So we have lost multiple pair, and they're not super cheap. They're not super expensive either, but they're not disposable priced. But those are definitely something to check out. Maybe your kids focus better when there's like instrumental music going on in the background. For years and years and years and years, we had low radio sounds, radio music playing in the background. Oftentimes it was classical music. Sometimes it was just a local country or Christian radio station. We just had whatever it was tended to be very soft music. And that's shifted over the years. The 2 kids that I currently am homeschooling don't really like that kind of noise in the background. So I don't usually play music during the day. One of my kids really likes white noise. I sleep to white noise, so that's helpful for me. I don't work well to white noise, though I personally, my brain works well when I have either an audiobook on that I've read or listened to a million times, or a movie playing in the background. Again, one that I know very well and have listened to or watched a million times, so I don't have to focus on what's happening next. It ends up being like white noise and background noise that allows me to focus and just lock in to whatever it is I'm trying to work on. have a noise plan in place for whichever of your kids is struggling. Maybe you need to add in movement. So maybe you get a seat that moves. If you have ever watched any of my videos of recording the podcasts, I know that most of the time you're listening because I don't have the infrastructure, but my podcast was created before all of the video podcasts came about. And so my infrastructure is really set up for audio podcasting, though I do record videos now of the podcast. So as I'm recording this, I'm recording a video. I haven't quite refigured out the back end configuration to get my videos up as edited. It's something that is definitely in the plans for 2026 because people have asked for it. I do use some of my podcast videos to create clips from, but that's neither here nor there. If you listen to my podcast on YouTube, since FeedBurner went away and FeedSpot went away, it goes directly up to YouTube and it just is the audio version on there. And as well as if you listen on Spotify or Amazon or Apple or wherever, it's audio. But if you were watching the videos or you've seen me teach live classes to students or parents or coaching calls or whatever, you would see that I am in a swivel chair and I just don't sit still. I struggle to stand when I present or teach on video, and so I sit so I have a little bit of movement. Maybe your kids need a swivel chair. Maybe they need an exercise ball to sit on. Maybe they need one of those wiggle chairs, or maybe they need, one of my kids used to need some sensory input. Like he really liked that kind of like prickly feeling, so we had an inflatable seat cushion, for lack of a better word, but it really wasn't a cushion. It was an inflatable like seat disc. On one side it was smooth and just gave a little bit of movement in the seat. On the other side it was like prickly in case he needed more sensory input. So it still moved, but it also like just gave the sensation of a rough edge. So maybe you need something like that so that your kiddo is getting some movement. Maybe you need a standing desk. My oldest edits often with his standing desk. He's got one of those desks that goes up or down as needed so he can sit at it or he can stand at it. A standing desk, I think, would drive me crazy because I do better when I'm like sitting and I'm comfortable and my legs are all curled up beneath me. Everybody has different needs. I have a friend who does almost all of her work at a standing desk on a treadmill. She walks all day long. I can't even imagine. I would start to lose focus and then I'd start focusing on my feet and I'd probably fall right off of the treadmill. But whatever it is your kiddo needs, start thinking about how you can adjust that. You could also use a footrest if you don't have the ability to do like a standing desk or anything like that. But just see what you can do to add some movement in. One other environmental tweak you can make, accommodation you can make, is reducing the visual load. So maybe you don't put all your kids' schoolwork out in front of them. Maybe you just put one page out. Maybe you only uncover a section of one page. You have the page covered, or you have a paragraph uncovered in a book, or you have everything else put away, or you have a colored overlay. Or when you print things out, you print out wider margins or in bigger font. Adjust the visual load as your kid needs it. You might also consider having a room that has little stuff clutter up the visual space so that it's calmer for their mind. I remember being an elementary teacher. I taught third grade for years and years, and then I taught second and third grade gifted students, and I taught other ages of gifted students and neurodivergent students as well. But oftentimes those elementary rooms, and I was guilty of this too, were so cluttered with bulletin boards and colors and centers and this and that and the other. And while it's great because it's so fun and welcoming and kids want to be there, there are some kids that just get overstimulated with all of that visual clutter and shut down. And so if we're noticing that our kids are shutting down with a lot of visual clutter, we can reduce that for them. Again, this is the benefit of homeschooling. We can adjust the environment as our kids need it to help them feel safe in their space, which ultimately will help them feel safe when it comes to assessment and performance. Okay, those are environmental accommodations. We can also make some accommodations within the timing and the pacing of how we teach, how we assess, and what we ask our kids to do. So we could give them work that is completely untimed. If our kids struggle with time-bound assignments, we can give them untimed. If our kids struggle with unlimited time, we can set timers. Maybe we can give them double the time. We need to adjust this based on our kid. It's so funny that this is coming up in my plans as I'm recording this because we just had a discussion in the Learners Lab today. The Learners Lab is my community for families who are homeschooling neurodivergent kiddos, gifted, twice exceptional, anxious, ADHD, and otherwise neurodivergent. We've got some families who have kids with autism in there of various levels. We have kids who have all sorts of learning challenges, as well as all sorts of types and levels of giftedness. It's a great place for you to be if you're looking for some connection for yourself, for your kids, along with some fun clubs and classes. But we have a parent forum that is just starting to pick up and get active again, which is great. And part of that was my fault. We had a very challenging 2025. I am so looking forward to coming into 2026 and just being rejuvenated and hopefully on a much better trajectory. But we had so many different health issues and health scares in our family and a lot of mental and emotional load that just took me away from being super active in the community. And it's all picking up again, partially because I'm back, but also partially because the parents are back too. It seems like this is just going to be a great year for all of us. We're all invested in making this happen. So we're having a discussion today about sensory challenges and what's working and what's not working for kids. And somebody mentioned a timer and had said, this is working really well for my kiddo. I can put it at 15-minute intervals and then it starts to count down. And she said, my only complaint is I wish it wasn't so loud because the buzzer is jarring. And if he doesn't turn it off, the buzzer keeps going and getting more and more jarring and louder and louder. And I said, oh my gosh, that would totally set my kids back because the two kids in particular that I have at home get very stressed with timers and time-bound challenges unless they choose to set them themselves. My youngest is responsible for emptying our dishwasher. That's his main chore. And he loves to play beat the timer on his own. So he'll set it, he'll get started, he'll get everything set up, he'll get cabinets and drawers open, and he'll set the timer on the microwave for 10, 15 minutes or whatever he chooses that day. And he will work as hard as he can to beat the timer. If I were to set a timer for him to get his work done, he would completely melt down and stress out. So you need to be careful when it comes to timers, but adjusting the time either up or down can work for your kids depending on what it is that benefits them. One way, if you need something to be time bound to adjust for a kid who struggles and stresses when they see the timer, is maybe put the timer behind your kiddo so you're watching it, not them, and then you can give them easy and calm cues to count down for them without them being stressed out. You can also adjust the pacing of what they're doing by utilizing micro chunks. So maybe say, okay, do 5 things right now and then we're going to take a break, and then you check in with them and you take a break. Maybe you do jumping jacks, maybe you run around the block, maybe you go outside and like dive in the snow, maybe you do 15 somersaults, or maybe you just get a snack. And then you go back and you do 5 more. So you chunk the assignment or the activities that you're doing that day into bite-sized pieces with breaks in between. You can also have a flexible start window. Maybe if you're using some of the warm-ups that we've talked about in previous episodes within this series and in the 2 series before this, where you're doing some heavy work and you're doing some prep before your kids are getting ready to sit down and work, maybe you give them a flexible window of when they can start. So you say, okay, we're going to do our warm-up together, and then I want you to start on your independent work within 30 minutes of our warm-up ending. Or we're going to do our warm-up, and then I'm going to play a song. It's a long song. It's 5 minutes and 32 seconds. I just want you to be starting on your work by the time the song ends. So adjust the pacing by giving them a flexible window in which they can start. You can also, and this is actually a really great strategy, especially for kids who start shutting down when they feel overwhelmed or their anxiety starts to ramp up, you can watch. I've talked about this before. I'll talk about this again. Being a student of your child, really know who your kids are and watch for their cues. What kinds of visual signs, physical signs, emotional signs do they give you right before it starts to get hard or right before they start to shut down? And start making a practice of stopping when it's still easy or stopping when they're still in that window of success. So you're going to stop well before the meltdown or the shutdown starts. You want to bank partials that end in success rather than a whole bunch of meltdowns and failures, because you can always go back to it. The more success your kiddo feels, no matter their age, the more likely they're going to keep trying because they're not over-focused on the failures. If they're constantly ending when it's still relatively easy or successful for them, they're going to be more able and apt to start the next time. All right, so we've talked about environmental accommodations, we've talked about timing and pacing accommodations. Now let's talk about some specific tools and formats that we can use to accommodate for our kids. One of the tools that we can use is to adjust the things that we do with their curriculum. So we could use different strategies like doing the odds only. That's a common math thing that was done when I was in school. My math teacher in high school would say, okay, you're going to do all the odds today. And then the next day, if we struggled with the lesson, we'd still have the evens to repractice on. So he'd have us do the evens the next time. Or one thing I love to do, especially with cognitively gifted kids, is I like to do what's called the 5 most difficult first. So I take a quick survey of the questions or problems or activities involved in the lesson, and I choose the 3 to 5 most difficult parts first, and I circle those. Because if your kids can demonstrate with 100% mastery on the 5 most difficult samples of what they just learned, they're going to be able to perform on the easier ones. And so we don't need to over-assess them. We just need to get an appropriate sample of their learning. So I would always tell my kids and my students, because I used this strategy when I was a gifted specialist, that if they got 100%, if they took their time, showed me mastery on the 5 most difficult problems for this lesson, they didn't have to do the other 10, 15, 20, 30 problems, because I could count that sampling as success. If they missed one, I'd give them like maybe 10 more and then 10 more and then 10 more until they could demonstrate mastery. So it gives them a break and gives them bite-sized ways to show that mastery. You could also use like a single best scenario of their evidence for having mastered a problem or a strategy or a lesson. We're going to talk more about some of those best evidence kinds in just a minute, but this is just like an alternate way to show that they've learned something. This works really well in like the content areas, science, history, health, social studies, those kinds of things, where like the most difficult problem first works really well for the skill-based subject areas like math, languages, grammar, that kind of thing. You can also switch up the format that you're using and have them give you an oral response. My youngest has been working through an astronomy book, like a middle school level astronomy book, and he finished the book, all of the exercises in the book, with the exception of a handful of the experiments that we're going to go back to do. And so I asked him, tell me some different things that you learned. Tell me some of the best things that you learned. And then he'd tell me some surfacey things, and then I'd probe deeper. And I realized there were a couple little gaps there, and I associated, now that I've looked through the book and talked to him, that the gaps are in the areas that had very specific activities or experiments that we haven't gone back to yet. Like he knew a lot about solar eclipses, but he didn't know a ton about lunar eclipses, because the solar eclipses were very detailed in the lessons and the assessments. So he did workbook pages and drawings and answering questions and comprehension activities about solar eclipses, but the lunar eclipse section was 2 different activities and experiments, which we haven't gotten to yet. So that showed me that the gaps are likely in those areas, and we'll go back to it. But the oral response took the pressure off him doing any kind of test, and I still got a really good picture of what he's understood and what he hasn't in this unit. You can also use scribing with this, so maybe you're writing down what they're telling you with notes and stuff, or they're using voice to text. and then they go back and they look at it and they fix it or they add to it. Or you could allow drawing or building. So they build you an example of what they learned, or they draw out sketches and models of what they've learned. You could come up with a word bank or like a formula sheet or an anchor chart that's visible for them, and they can use it to guide their teaching you about what they have learned and what they've understood from the lessons that they've done. You can also give them a calculator for some of their computation. If the concept is the goal, the calculations don't matter as much in that moment. So if they're doing multi-step problems, to learn how to calculate the concept, to learn how to go through the concept of multi-step problems, the actual calculation from step to step isn't as important as knowing what step comes first, second, third, and fourth to get to the problem. So if we could take one element out of a task that they're learning, we should do that when we're seeing kids who are struggling with performance and test anxiety. So if we can allow them calculators, let's do it. Maybe we give them graph paper so they can line things up better if they're writing out their problems, or 2-column paper. So the format is a little bit changed, but the tools are there to support what they're actually doing. Okay, so environmental, time and pacing based, and then formatting and tools. Let's talk about some human supports that we can give them. One of these is one I've talked about on this podcast before. It's called body doubling. So instead of having your kids sit on their own, do their work on their own, you're sitting next to them. Maybe you're nearby. Maybe you're parallel to them. You're shoulder to shoulder with them. You're doing a quiet task. You're not hovering in their material. You're not doing their stuff with them, but you're there. Your bodies are doubled at the table, right? You're working quietly on your task. They're working quietly on their task, but you're there as a safety blanket. So if they do struggle or have a problem, they can ask. A lot of times presence is all that is needed. And this is really hard for us as homeschooling parents who have a bunch of kids pulling us in different directions. Or even if we have one child at home with us, we have other things pulling us. Maybe we have a work at home job. Maybe we have other responsibilities, maybe with co-op. I'm going through this right now. I have a job. I am a podcaster, a speaker, an author. I have a community online that I host, and I just started at Mail Club for Kids. Tons of things going on. And I always have something that I could be doing for one or more of those different pieces to my work. I also have a kid away at college who still needs reassurance and check-in periodically. I have another kid who is an adult, and I want to have conversations with him. And so he and I have a relationship that needs to be nurtured. And then I have another homeschooling student. I have 2 homeschooling students that are being pulled in different directions as well. Plus, I have a house that I need to keep going, keep from breaking down into rubble around us. Though I will tell you right now, listen to this with a grain of salt, because nobody is perfect, and I am certainly not perfect at all. My house is in relative rubble right now. We're working on arranging rooms, switching rooms out, adjusting, and it's been mid-progress for about 2 months. Meaning, my basement has become a dumping ground. One half of the finished attic, where 2 of our kids have separate sides, is just a dumping ground while we're theoretically removing everything from the other one to deep clean it before moving things back. It's a mess. I've got things in every hallway. I've got things filling my basement. I've got things filling the one kid's room. And my college daughter's bedroom has also started to become a holding place. It's a disaster. So you've got lots of things pulling yourself in different directions. Use this body doubling time to do any of the paperwork or any of the quiet activities that you can do. Maybe it's actually taking a break. Maybe this is a chance for you to work on a new hobby, like crocheting or drawing or journaling or anything like that. Maybe it's time for you to catch up on some paperwork. Today, I needed to do some email work. My email box is out of control. So when my youngest was working on his schoolwork, he was in my office in the cozy chair with the pug curled up in his lap, doing his work, and I was very close to him at my desk doing my work. And there were a couple times he just needed reassurance. He needed to check in about something, or he needed to tell me a fact. I heard it. We went back to our work. So a human support can just be your presence. You can also adjust the different things your kids are asked to do by doing some read aloud. Maybe you read aloud the directions. Maybe you read aloud the questions. Maybe you rephrase what the problem, the book, the text, the project is asking them to do. You adjust it for them using your words and your interpretations to get them out of their block and moving back on. You can also give them some prompts. Maybe you give them a visual cue. Maybe you tap on their shoulder if they need some support getting back on track. Maybe you give them just a single verbal cue. No pep talks. Come on, you can do this. You got this. Maybe it's just, okay, let's get finished. Something like that. You're giving them some different prompts to get them going again. You can also give your kids planned regulation breaks. If one of your kids struggles, falls into that emotional or physical regulation area, planning multiple breaks throughout the day where you're getting outside, where you're going for a walk, where you're having a crunchy snack can really help your kid refocus. Maybe you take 2 to 3 minutes in between different things, or when you notice attention is waning and you do a little bit of heavy work, or you get some really cold water to drink, or you drink yogurt, you have your kids drink yogurt through a straw. Something to break it up, give them that human support they need, that physical break, and then some kind of sensory input. So human adaptations and supports that you can give. You've got the time and the pacing. You've got the environmental differences and situations. We can also have some scripts that we can use to help our kids. We can tell them, hey, look, when it doesn't count, you've shown me you know how to do this. So let's take a breath. Let's do a little bit of heavy work. Let's do some push-ups, get our brains back on track, and then show me how you showed me 10 minutes ago when it didn't count with this one that counts. Give them words so they understand what their brain is doing and help them help themselves so that the next time they hit a roadblock on something that they knew, they could take a breath, step back, and be like, wait, I got this. I did it before. This is just my brain throwing up a roadblock because I get anxiety when I think it counts. It's no different than what it was like before. So I just need to take a breath. Help your kids understand themselves.
Okay, so let's talk about math. Specifically, let's talk about finding a program that actually works for your unique homeschoolers. In our house, we've been using CTC Math for years. And even though I am so appreciative that they sponsor this podcast, I am a paying customer. I'm still a paying customer even with their sponsorship because it's just that good, and I love supporting great companies with great programs. With 2 kids still at home, both with very different learning needs, CTC Math has been the flexible and dependable solution that I keep coming back to. One of my kiddos needs more time to process math concepts, and I love that she can move through the lessons at her own pace without feeling rushed or behind. My other kiddo, he flies. He jumps straight to the end of unit tests to see what he already knows, and then we only focus on the lessons that fill the gaps. That kind of customization is gold when you're homeschooling gifted or twice exceptional kids. CTC Math gives you the access to every grade level, from kindergarten through 12th grade with your subscription, so that your child can accelerate, review, or jump around based on their own needs, not based on some rigid curriculum structure. And because it's video-based with clear instruction and auto-graded lessons and quizzes, it frees me up to support my kids without being chained to a textbook, teacher's manual, or whiteboard. So whether your child needs more time or is racing ahead, you can tailor it all with CTC Math. Check it out at ctcmath.com. You will see why so many homeschool families trust it. And if you've got quirky math learners like I do, I think you're going to love it. If you have any questions about CTC, like I said, we've been using it for years in our homeschool, and I encourage you to reach out and ask me any questions that you have. If you do pop over there, let them know that I sent you, and let them know that you appreciate their ongoing support of homeschoolers everywhere, especially those of you here at Raising Lifelong Learners. All right, let's get back to today's episode.
Okay, so let's shift gears for a bit and let's talk about something I alluded to a few minutes ago, alternative activities that can help you and your kids still show mastery. So these are different ideas, like if we're changing the format or what we're asking our kids to do, these are some very concrete, practical ways that you can do that. So I'm going to give you some different ideas in a bunch of different areas, like content areas, so that there are legitimate, accessible, fast other ways to review material and demonstrate mastery. And in your homeschool, you are allowed to make these accommodations and make these changes. So swap out showing me everything for showing me the best evidence you can for how you've mastered something. So let's just talk about math first. You can do two worked examples. So pick the two hardest on the page, have your kids work those out and show you that they know how to do it, and then do a 60-second verbal check-in. Why did you do that? What made you choose to do this step here? Can you explain your thinking to me? So if they can do two problems, the hardest on the page, and explain why it worked, we can count mastery. We don't have to have every problem finished just because there are 30 problems on a page. We want mastery before we move our kids on, so we want to know they understand it at a deep level. So that's one thing that you can do that's the best evidence that your kid has mastered a topic. If your kids are very hands-on, you can pull out the Legos, have them build an array or a model that shows a mathematical concept, have them take a picture, and then label it like it's a diagram, and then explain to you what they've done in the diagram. You've got some hands-on, you've got some teaching. When somebody is confident enough in a concept to be able to teach it to somebody else and help them understand it, it's set deeper into their brain. And so that's a very good way for a hands-on student to demonstrate mastery. You can also send your kiddo on an error hunt. Have them find and fix mistakes that you've made in a sample. So go take 5 of their problems and solve them incorrectly, showing your work. And then have your kid go on an error hunt to find out where you made those mistakes and explain to you why those were mistakes and why the answer they got is the correct answer. This is a great exercise for metacognition. When you're helping your kids learn how their brain works and helping them use their words to explain their thinking, like thinking about their thinking and explaining their thinking, error hunts are a great way to do that. So how about reading? If we're doing reading and comprehension and inferential thinking and stuff like that, what can we do? So you could trade line read, meaning you read one line, they read one line. You read one line, they read one line. And then you ask them to give you 3 bullet points to teach back the section you two just read together. So you're taking some of the pressure off the reading. They're learning to hear and comprehend auditorily, aurally, A-U-R-A-L-L-Y. Oh my gosh, I don't know why that was so hard to say, but they're learning to use their oral skills to understand and comprehend. They're also using their visual reading skills to understand and comprehend. So you're going back and forth. You get to the end of a section or whatever, paragraph, section, whatever it is that fits, chapter, whatever it is that fits best for whatever it is you're reading. And then you ask them to give you 3 overarching key points to teach you back what you guys just read in that section. You can also use graphic novels for this, or comics, where you are having them read to you the comic or the graphic novel page or chapter or whatever, and you cover the last panel or two and ask them to predict what might be in it, reveal the final panel or panels, and then talk about what was right or what was wrong about their prediction and what cues in the comic or graphic novel gave them a clue as to what would be in that final panel. Graphic novels often get a bad rap, comics often get a bad rap, but they actually are pretty sophisticated. The imagery and the motion in the pictures and the words that are used, the author illustrator combo or person, if it's one and the same, have to be really careful about the words they choose to put in those speech bubbles and the motions they have their characters making on the page so that they work together and are necessary together. So they don't overuse words and overuse images. They use just enough of both to tell the whole story. So they're pretty sophisticated and a really good learning tool. You could also use an audiobook, work on those oral skills, and then do an oral retelling of what they heard. So you're listening to an audiobook or an audiobook chapter together, and then afterwards ask your kids to tell you 3 details about what they just heard and 1 feeling word to describe what emotions were evoked by that piece of reading. So then we're talking about motivation, we're talking about emotions that are being elicited by the words the author created and how the narrator is portraying it. So you can get into some really deep discussions and assess their comprehension and inferential thinking skills. Okay, writing. Writing can often be a battle with kids who struggle. Maybe you're doing postcard writing. Postcard writing is just like a strategy where instead of writing a whole paper, you're writing like a postcard equivalent. So you're doing like a title, 3 details or bullet points, and maybe a doodle. So it's like an encapsulated version of what you're trying to have your kids write so that they're not over stressing about the physical act of writing and they're still getting good ideas and details down on paper. Maybe you're using voice to text and then your child edits like 3 sentences or 3 paragraphs or whatever it is that they've done. Voice to text can work really well, but we also want to make sure that we're doing some fine motor writing as well. You can have your kids, when it comes to writing, caption a photo. Write a main sentence and 3 details or labels for the photo that they're captioning. This is a really good writing exercise because, again, they're thinking like an author and an illustrator team and using words to help describe or further what's going on in the picture. You can also give them a choice board. We use choice boards a lot in the Learners Lab. Every single month we have a social and emotional or creative critical thinking or executive function skill theme. And we talk about that. Kids can earn physical badges for completing the activities within that theme over the course of the month with their family. And we produce a choice board with 9 different activities that focus specifically on that theme that kids can do 1 or all 9 of, or 3, like a tic-tac-toe board, whatever they and their family decide to do together, and then they can order a badge to be mailed to them. And so that's a lot of fun. But a choice board is basically just a tic-tac-toe board with 9 different choices, or just 3 squares on a page where there's 3 different things written down and they get to choose. So a writing choice board could include writing an email to grandma, telling her about your week, writing a short how-to card, maybe how to create this recipe I just created, or how to build the Lego ship that I just built, or how to add the sound effects to my stop motion animation. Or you could have another choice, like a 45-second audio note that they create to tell somebody about their day, because writing is not the same as handwriting. We want both, but writing is the act of getting ideas out and communicating ideas that have a beginning, middle, end, details. And so sometimes we need to take the physical act out of writing and just use the idea generation part of it. Okay, science and social studies / history, or whatever you want to call it, a couple different ideas. You could do a demonstration. You could do a quick build or experiment demonstrating some concept in history or social studies or civics or government or science, and then include 3 labeled photos of the process, or label your building, your project. So something physical. You could also create a concept map. Do it on a whiteboard where they've got like the main idea in the center and all sorts of things branched out from it with additional details, and then details going off of the details. Snap a picture of it if you need to keep a portfolio, because then you can put it in your kid's portfolio. Maybe they do a mini lecture. So they take your phone or a voice memo system that you have, or their own tablet, and they record 1 to 3 minute lecture about a topic that they've studied in social studies, history, science, whatever. and teach somebody like a lecture series. And then you can listen to it and play it. You can also transcribe it and print it out so it becomes part of their permanent record as well. Really great way to demonstrate mastery. Executive function. It's not really a topic or not really a subject area, but so many of our neurodivergent kids struggle with executive function that I thought it was worth including some ideas for accommodating executive function when it comes to test and performance anxiety. So we can start with a 3-step plan, giving our kids icons for the first, second, and third step, and then an after action sentence where they reevaluate, because reflection is one of the executive function skills. What changed? How did we adapt? How did we make it better? And what would we change about this situation? So going back to that metacognition, going back to the reflection, and assessing how they did in a situation using a 3-step plan. We could also use a visual checklist in new context. So maybe you're creating a visual checklist for the bag that they're bringing to co-op, or the bag that they're bringing in the car for a long road trip, or the things that they need to do before they get ready for archery on the day that they have archery, or whatever it is. And they come up with a checklist. They create a checklist for something they haven't used a checklist for before. When our kids are working through these different alternatives, one of the ways that we can take the assessment and make it even more safe for our kids is we can use just our own version of an internal rubric where we're giving one glowing comment and one growing comment. So we give them one thing that really we loved about it, what stood out about it, and then one tweak that they might want to think about making in the future. So we're not saying, oh, this is wrong or this is terrible. We're saying, this was really good. I loved how you did this. Maybe next time when you keep doing that thing that was incredible, and then in this section, you can do like this or this, which might bump it up to that incredible level of the other part of it. So you're giving them compliments and using those, the things that it's just like when we do strength-based learning, right? We're using the strong part of the activity to build up the weaker part and help them see how they can make it better without making them feel badly about themselves. Okay, so some of the things that we can do to say to our kids when it comes to these adjustments is just to reduce the panic if they start to feel stressed. We could say, for kids especially who are like low demand, when they have that autonomy defense, or maybe they've been diagnosed with PDA, okay, we need to write, but we're going to focus on writing a postcard, not a paper. We'll stop when it still feels safe and still feels easy and then come back to it later. But let's just focus on one main idea and 3 details, and then we'll come back. That's just like a postcard snapshot instead of the whole paper. Or maybe we say, one proof is all I need. You take your pick. Which do you think is hardest, this one or this one? Show me how you get to the answer of this one. Or you say, I'll go first. I'll do this, and then you take one next step. Or you say, okay, passing is allowed. We can come back to this. So if you pass, I'll do it right now. You can be quality control, check my work, and then next time you can try again. For you, and for me, this can be really difficult, right? Because we're thinking that we're letting them go and we're not holding them accountable for the learning that we need them to do, and they're going to be soft forever, and maybe they will, but they probably won't. If we honor what they need in the moment, and we help them feel safe, and we help them form secure attachments, then they will go on to continue to grow up. And whether it takes a year, maybe they're like super independent and autonomous at 18 or 19. Maybe they're not super independent and autonomous till they're 30. It's okay. Like in the past, we had closer ties to our immediate and extended family than we do now. I think it's unreasonable to expect all neurodivergent kids, whether they're gifted or not, whatever side of the bell curve they fall on, to be fully formed human adults at 18 and ready to go off into the world and make their way. Some take longer, and that's okay. There are people doing jobs now that didn't exist when they graduated high school. I'm doing a job now that didn't exist when I graduated high school. Now, some would argue that I'm still doing a job within the field I went to college for, but it looks very different. The vast majority of people who go to school to be an educator teach in some form of school, and that's not what I'm doing. And so the job that I have right now, podcasting, speaking existed, but podcasting did not exist when I was in college, and an online membership and community, and it just wasn't a thing. And we weren't talking as much about the social and emotional needs of our kids and helping them grow to be more secure adults. So I've taken, sure, the education that I had, but I've turned it upside down and sought an alternate path. Our kids might do that too. They might need a break before they go into formal education. They might never go into formal education. They might go right into formal education. They might switch majors 3 times. It's okay, especially if we help them understand that demonstrating their information and their knowledge in the way that they feel safest is what's important and what will help them grow. So we need to remember, and this might be something you want to write on a sticky note, put on your laptop, put in your notebook, put it in your purse or your wallet, on your bathroom mirror. Anxiety is the overestimation of a threat, right? And it's the underestimation of coping. When we have that anxiety response in our body, our amygdala, our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response overestimates the threat. But it also underestimates our ability to cope with a threat. It goes into hyperdrive because it's trying to protect us, when in actuality, we need to learn that we're safe and we can protect ourselves. So we need to work on a plan that adjusts for both the overestimation of the threat and the underestimation of our coping skills. So by building up our kids' toolbox of coping skills, we can help our kids start to underestimate the threat, or at least trust themselves that they have skills to come when their body feels threatened. And so we do that by creating and collecting accurate data and assessing that and reflecting on it instead of just toughening it out. Sometimes, and for some kids, tough it out doesn't work. It breaks them down. For some kids, they can use that strategy. We need to be cognizant of who needs what when. And the truth of the matter is, for you parents listening, you're going to make mistakes. The kid you thought you needed to accommodate for more may come back and tell you someday, I wish you'd had me toughen it out more. Some of those kids that you had tough it out might come back and say, I wish that you had not pushed me through this, that, or the other, and let me come at it when I was ready. We make mistakes as parents. We can't get everything perfectly because we can't see what the outcome's going to be. We need to do the best we can in the moment we have with the information that we have available to us at this time. We're not ruining our kids if we don't give them exactly what they need right now. If we're approaching everything with our best effort and our best knowledge and our best intentions, and first and foremost, loving our kids for who they are, trusting ourselves and trusting them, and helping them become the best versions of themselves. So remember that when you're feeling overwhelmed. Getting accurate data is always more important than pushing through, even if that means you're letting them go a little bit longer than you want to or think, or somebody else thinks you should, especially if you have a spouse that's like, you're being too soft on them. Ultimately, accommodations reveal skills. They don't hide them. So when we're making accommodations, we're not hiding the skills our kids have. We're helping their bodies, brains, and minds and emotions feel safe enough to let the skills show themselves so that they can utilize those skills, so that then we can see the gaps more accurately, and then we can help push them through their gaps and use their strengths to improve those gaps. Okay, when our kids start to wobble, when we're talking about those accommodations that we want to make, maybe they're working on something, it's all going well, and then you start to see the precursor to some of those threat responses. We want to use some of these kind of mini scripts. Here's just some tools you can have in your back pocket. You can say, hey, let's park this item for right now. Do 2 more, and then we'll revisit it later. Or do 1 more. Or let's just stop right now. Let's just take a break, and we'll come back to it when we feel better about it. And then go on to something you know your kids are going to feel successful with, so that you can ride the success back to the struggle and hopefully use that success to propel that struggle forward a little bit. You could say, hey, let's take a break right now. I'm going to set the music for 2 consecutive songs, and then you choose if you want to do odds only on this section or you want to show me one piece of best evidence to prove to me this material. Or you say, I'm hearing that this is too much for you right now. Let's cut the task in half and see how we're feeling after half of it. So those are just 3 little things that you can say in the moment when their abilities to cope start to wobble a little bit. Okay, let's talk about some special cases that might be helpful to know going in. So if your kiddo struggles with that autonomy, defense, or PDA, we want to give them invitations, right? We want to say, I'm setting up the first 3 things. Jump in if you want to or where you're ready to. I'm going to do these first 3 activities. I'm going to get started. Come join me when you're ready. Give them choice within boundaries. Do you want to do odds only? Do you want to show me one proof of mastery? Do you want to do it today or do you want to do it tomorrow morning? If you choose tomorrow morning, it's the first thing that we're going to do, or we can get it out of the way right now. Would you like me to scribe for you while you tell me what you're thinking, or would you rather use voice to text? Maybe you give them opportunities to opt out with dignity. Maybe you say, okay, this is feeling like too much right now. Let's take a break and we'll table it and we'll come back. And then you move on to something that's going to give them success and you don't revisit it till the next day. But what you're doing here is you're preserving future buy-in. If you're ending things on a win, they're going to be more apt to buy in the next time. Okay, maybe you have a kiddo like several of mine that are perfectionists, or you are a perfectionist like me. You might be able to adjust this or adapt it to your own life as well. Try to help encourage them to give it an ugly first pass. Maybe you do a hilariously imperfect model of what they're trying to do, and then you ask them to fix 3 things on it or find all the mistakes, but make mistakes. This is also a really good strategy when the perfectionism is pervasive and goes through everything. Make mistakes when you can. Drop an egg while you're scrambling eggs for breakfast and go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did this. Hey, can you keep beating these eggs and maybe break another 2 or 3 into this bowl? I'm going to clean up this egg that I broke. Forget something that you wanted to remember. Do something just silly. Make mistakes. And then laugh them off and then show them how you fix them. Keep a journal of the mistakes you make. Maybe you guys keep a family mistakes journal and you jot down your favorite mistakes that you've ever made and maybe what they taught you. Or you spend a few minutes at every dinner time talking about what is one mistake you made today? What is one thing that you did that you never want to do again? Talk about it, be silly with it, and then adjust for it. And then if they're up for it, ask them what they learned from it. Talk about how you learned from it too. If you've got a kiddo who's twice exceptional, they're gifted and they've got some other kind of challenge. Maybe it's academic, cognitive, physical, neurological, or mental, emotional going on. Give them ceiling tasks that are unnamed. Where they are strongest, give them untimed things that they can get to the end of in however long it takes, but let them shine. Give them a chance to be super duper successful in something that has no timing, no supports, nothing. You know they're going to shine. Then give them kind of a foundational task in an area in which they struggle with some supports to help them succeed. So you're accommodating for their weaker area after giving them a chance to show super success in an area where they're strongest. So you're letting them shine and then you're letting them succeed. Separate the idea quality from the output mechanics. So maybe your kid is a great creative storyteller. They come up with fabulous stories. You think that they've got author inside that belly of theirs, that mind of theirs. They have the ability to be a great fiction writer. But the mechanics of writing, typing, getting their ideas out on paper, even going back and adjusting for the mistakes from talk to text is very overwhelming for them. Give them opportunities to know how great their ideas are and share about it, even if you're using that talk to text, and then give them support in the fixing of it. So maybe that author of yours dictates everything of their story, and then you go back and you adjust it. Hey, all of the most famous writers have developmental and copy editors that go through their work. Developmental editors make the content better, and copy editors make the content grammatically correct. And so you can act as a developmental and a copy editor while your kids are getting their ideas out. So we're separating the quality of what they're good at versus the mechanics of getting it out there. Okay, I want you always, though, to remember that sometimes some of these things our kids have going on need formal evaluation. Remember, this is not diagnostic. I can't tell you over a podcast that your kid needs a diagnosis, but I can give you some things that you want to keep in mind for maybe when you want to seek help. So maybe the panic episodes or the anxiety triggers physical symptoms. They are having heart palpitations. They are completely melting down. They're getting sweaty. They're getting headaches or stomach aches. Definitely get that checked out. Maybe they are being consistently avoidant across different settings. It is pervasive in all areas. It's not just with one topic anymore. And nothing you're doing, none of the accommodations you're making are seeming to make a difference. This is definitely a time to seek help. Or maybe they're putting forth their best effort and you're doing all of these accommodations, but they keep regressing. So you make a little bit of progress, but then you go way back. You want to consult maybe a pediatrician, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, an occupational therapist. You want to consult somebody who is a professional and can evaluate in those specific areas, okay? So if it gets to be to a point where the accommodations you're trying, the supports you're trying just aren't working, definitely see if you can get more support. Okay, in a nutshell, over the next week, before this next episode, I want you to pick the next thing that you're going to assess or evaluate. Is it a math thing coming up? Is it some unit that you're finishing in science? Choose one accommodation out of the things we talked about earlier: the environment, the pacing, the noise, the human, the tools, whatever, and choose one. Practice it with your kids, try it, do some maybe 5-item micro chunks with accommodations in there, and then give them some ways to show you the best evidence that they've mastered that concept. Review wins with them, support them, reflect, and then take some time yourself to evaluate how things have gone. You will know that some of the accommodations that you are making have shown success when latency starts to shrink, meaning they're less about dragging their feet and more about getting it done. They're not showing as much anxiety when something comes up. They're more motivated to do things. You'll also notice success when fewer body alarm signals are showing off. They're not breathing rapidly, they're not fidgeting as much, they're more calm when they're in a situation that's showing some kind of assessment or evaluation. Their recovery is faster after they've had that wobble. They can come back to material after a quick break instead of after a day or two. And one of the best ways to measure success is that they are voluntarily re-engaging with you. They're saying something like, hey, I want to show you something, or I want to try that again. This is a huge win, and I want you to celebrate it. In fact, it's so important to celebrate those wins with your kids and with others that I encourage you, if you don't have a community or another person to celebrate those successes with, to find somebody. Just find one other person. Shoot me an email. I respond to all emails. Sometimes it takes a while, but I respond to all. Even if it's, oh my gosh, I had a win today. I had no one else to tell. This happened. I'll at least shoot you back an email probably within the week that says, oh my gosh, go you. Congratulations. That's amazing. Hit me up on social media, DM me. Better yet, if you've been on the fence, join the Learners Lab. We have forums that people share wins all the time in, and others chime in and comment on it. Now, it is a small group, meaning I don't have 1,000 or 2,000 members like some giant communities. We have a couple hundred, meaning just by the rules of engagement that there's probably at any given day between 6 and 30 people engaging in content. This is not a ton of people, and it's not an overwhelming group, because we are very specifically engaged with families who are homeschooling, quirky, differently wired, neurodivergent, gifted twice exceptional, or otherwise challenged kiddos. And those wins are specific to your type of kid. So come join us. You can cancel at any time. Join month to month, see if you like it. Upgrade to annually to save a couple bucks. You'll have opportunities to share your wins, to join in group coaching calls with me once a month, with Sarah Collins, a homeschool OT, once a month. She does an OT-focused coaching call, with occasional master classes a couple times a year where I'm teaching you about a specific topic, but then your kids have opportunities to engage as well. I teach 2 classes every single month, one that is focused completely on the theme and helps support your kids in their social emotional, critical thinking, and executive function and creative thinking growth, with lots of activities related to that you can work on throughout the month as much as you can handle. I also do a creative thinking class that's usually related to that theme. And then we have some fun clubs. I have a teen and tween meetup that is facilitated by a licensed teacher who works with kids who are differently wired and has a differently wired homeschool kid of her own. I have another friend who is the facilitator of a Lego club once a month where your kids can bring their builds and do mini builds with the group. And then I host a doodle club where we draw together and doodle together and just chat for half an hour to an hour every single month. We plan to add a bunch of different clubs throughout the year, so there will be more for your kids to participate in if they just need that tangible connection with very little prep. All for the one price. Right now the subscription runs $37 a month. And like I said, you get access to everything that's in there. It's not one of those online learning platforms that you either get a subscription with credits to go to different classes or different clubs, or you subscribe to different classes throughout. You just get access to everything for that price, meaning I don't expect you to use everything. Use as much or as little of it as you want, because the truth is one class is about the price of the whole membership as it would be if it were on a platform like an OutSchool or another platform like that has lots of different opportunities for your kids to participate in clubs. So even if you just participated in 1 or 2 things, or you just came to the coaching calls, it's totally worth the $37 a month. Or like I said, you can upgrade to annually and you save 2 months worth of your membership. All right, I'll be back same time, same place next week. We're going to wrap up this series related to emotional regulation, anxiety, PDA, and all of that, with some talk about sleep struggles, particularly with our anxious and ADHD kids. But there's lots that can apply to all sorts of neurodivergent kids as well. So I hope you'll come back. Again, thank you to CTC Math for their support this season and past seasons. We really appreciate them. Go let them know you heard about CTC here on the Raising Lifelong Learners podcast, and thank them for continuing to support the podcast, because it really is what makes it happen. Check out Curiosity Post if you're looking for a fun mail club for your kids, where they get letters and activities from me in the mail every single month. And join us in the lab. I hope you join us there. I look forward to seeing you. Have fun with your kids this week. Enjoy them, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.